Align and Awaken with Mother Earth Rising podcast. Let's rise and heal together with me, Pippa, your Mother Earth healer. Hi guys, welcome back to the show. I think this interview is probably one of the most exciting ones that I can't wait to do this one. So I am with the beautiful Sarah Bowen. She is an award-winning author, animal chaplain, and multi-faith spiritual educator. So this is going to be an amazing interview. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Pippa.
Honestly, it's the most exciting one. I've been so excited to talk to you all week.
Likewise, I think we're going to get into some juicy stuff today.
We are. So first, for the listeners, just explain a little bit about you and the work that you do for the planet.
Sure. Animal chaplain is always the word that people want me to unpack. So I'll start there.
Okay.
So, if you've ever heard anything about chaplains, we see them in the military. We see chaplains that are at hospitals or corporate chaplains, or there's even chaplains on cruise ships now. There's eco chaplains, all of these different kind of things where we're trying to support a group of people that may be outside of a religious organization. So as an animal chaplain, that means I support all sentient beings, regardless of their species and regardless of their belief system. So that means I work with humans from all sorts of different walks of life, and I work with animals too, and the combination between the two. And as a spiritual educator, it means I help people. I work at a seminary in New York City, and I help people kind of go through the world's religions and traditions and philosophies and figure out, how do these things interlink and how are they useful to us? And, where do we make messes and what can we do about that? So I'm really interested in the intersections of spirituality and our lives from a very practical sense.
I love that. And I think, when I read Animal Chaplain, I'm like, it just reminds me of like a helper, like you just help it. Like if you, like you said, with the animals, they don't have a voice. So you're kind of giving them a voice too. It's beautiful. And I think so many people will relate to that because so many of us love animals, don't we?
It does. And we've been really conditioned by various ideas to think that animals are somehow less than, or animals deserves, not us, of course, probably listening to this podcast, but as a society, at societies we have. And, kind of unpacking all of that and starting to understand that the human-animal bond is incredibly strong and important and useful and essential, not only to our health, but to animals' health, planet health. How that all gets entangled is really messy. So there's this kind of, personal experience we have of perhaps having an animal in our home that we love. Mm. And what do we do when they're sick or when they pass or, they get lost or all those things. But then there's these really big existential questions. And those are kind of some of the fun ones to get into too, about if we're spiritual folks and we believe in certain spiritual values or ethics or values, what does that mean about how we treat the animals outside our homes too? So, it's kind of both of those things. Wherever animals are, I want to be.
Me too. And what was really interesting was, I know you spoke to Chris on his podcast. So all my listeners know Chris because I'm always talking about him on my podcast. And Chris is actually who put me in touch with Sarah. So I'm so grateful for that. And as a lot of you know, Chris, my partner, has a podcast, and that's how we met. So, it's just beautiful how we did. But I was listening to one of his episodes today, and it was the wildebeest episode. And it was just fascinating. And I was driving home today and I was listening to the bit about when they migrate. And obviously I learned so much from them when Angie and Chris are talking. So, and Angie said, there's no research. Well, there's research and there's studies done, but the scientists don't know what makes them migrate. Like there's nothing to say like a switch goes, right, migrate today. It's just, and I was listening to it and I was thinking, every animal has this beautiful gift, they're very much connected to the earth and they have a dharma, and we have a dharma too. And what I loved about it, I was thinking about it and I was like, you can't put a scientific study and get evidence for intuition. You just can't. So I thought it's the intuition. And I remember I voice note Chris today and I said, I obviously he'll agree with this and see it that way, but when the wildebeest want to migrate south or back north, it's intuition. Their intuition, their inner compass, their inner light says it's time to move. And then when I relate that to humans, the complexity that humans have ego, so the ego gets in the way with the intuition, is, for example, when I was in Australia and I felt called to go back to university to study animal behavior, and that led me to Chris and downloading his podcast, that was an intuitive decision. So the wildebeest are doing the same, and every other animal are doing the same. So I got a bit teary when I had that little, connection today. And I just think that's what, if you can connect to our planet and our animals and our plants, you start to see everything completely different.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting now, Pippa, is this idea that science and spirituality are interlinked. They don't have to be in opposition. And that I like to say there are two different languages for us trying to figure out the mysterious stuff that goes on around us. And prior to some of the, scientific methods that we have now, some of them which I'm in favor of, and some of them which I'm not so in favor of if they hurt, people. But, prior to that, religions and philosophies and, different ways of managing the mind or looking at the world, that's how we got Christianity and Buddhism and the lines that we call Hinduism. But all of these kind of things was trying to figure out what's going on around me, how do I deal with it, and how do I deal with conflicts? And so one of the things I really love to do is to go back into our sacred text and the Dhammapada or the Hebrew scriptures or the Tao Te Ching, and go back and say, all right, where are there critters in here? And what do we say about them? And how does that tell us that we've had these challenges since day one of how do we live when our needs or our wants, are in conflict? And I think that you're right about some of these things like intuition or thinking or sensing or that kind of spiritual connection we might have. There are certain things that studies can tell us about this. And we're humans. We're going to try to figure it out, right? We're going to test it and test it and test it and try to figure out. But there are also things where, I love the scientists who say, hey, we don't know. We have no idea why that's going on. You look at lots of the explorations of space. Mm-hmm. They're like, we have no idea why there's all this, going on. And if we can have mystery and curiosity, I think that those of us who are spiritual, we have a different language of being able to talk about that and posit some ideas and not get stuck in needing to have so much certainty.
Yeah, it's like that openness to everything. Like you start to question. I always say, as a kid, I would question everything. I remember my parents used to say, Pip, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Can you stop asking questions? Because as soon as I was awake, I was like, blah, 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 blah.
It's a curious mind.
Yeah. And I've always, if I want to ask, even at like events or I was, on a Zoom and I'm learning from someone like yourself, I'll ask questions to understand. And obviously scientists, I know Chris's mind's very much like that. He wants the proof, the evidence. But again, that curiosity is like, we don't need to know. We're here to learn, obviously on this life and what we want to learn in this life, but all what's out there and things that we don't have evidence and full proof. Like you said, Sarah, I like that unknown, but then a lot of people on the planet who aren't really connected yet find it hard to connect the unknown. They like to know everything. It's that control.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's why we have so many beautiful spiritual practices, to try to deal with the unknown and to deal with, spirituality is not all beautiful bliss. I'm in the lotus position and I'm fully connected and everything's fine. Like spirituality and religious traditions, they teach us how to deal with the crap when it comes along. Like, what do you do with that? And I think asking questions is how I got started. I was this 6 or 7-year-old kid who was walking home from school, and I was a preacher's kid. And I would see these little bodies on the side of the road, little chipmunks or squirrels that had been hit by cars. And it broke my heart. Mm-hmm. And I'd open up my little lunchbox and I'd stick these little buddies in there. And I'd take them home and I'd dig up my mother's rose bushes and I'd put them in there, give them a little funeral. Like I'd see my dad give humans funerals because I thought, we should do the same thing. and I would put them in, and I'm a Star Wars freak, so I would end the little funeral with "May the Force be with you, Chipmunk." And I had a lot of questions about how do we treat animals, when they're gone. Leaving them on the side of the road like a smashed tin can was not okay with me. And I think that goes back to what you mentioned, Pippa, with intuition.
Yeah.
I had some sort of feeling of there's something wrong with this. And now whether my little service and my prayers and my "Force be with you, Chipmunk" helped that animal in any way, I don't know. Our religious traditions give us a lot of different ideas about that. Perhaps the Eastern traditions are more favorable about, what we do to a being upon their death and right after their death makes a difference. In Buddhism, there's this idea of the bardo. So if we lose a cat or a dog or even the wild living beings I care about, this idea that you can continue to have a connection with them and talk with them for 7 days or more. And that, doing blessings for animals can help them in their reincarnation. So we have, kind of that idea. Mm-hmm. And then we have other things that come out of the Abrahamic traditions, that give us other ideas. So we have been concerned about, what do you do? How do you revere them? So the new book, Sacred Sendoffs, is really talking about that. Like, how do we handle animals when they're gone? Mm-hmm. And how do we deal with grief and loss in spiritual ways?
Yeah, I always wonder that, because obviously I've got my dog right here and he's like my son. Like, some people don't understand that. I hear I know people don't mean it that way, but like my family, like, he's just a dog. It's like, he's not just a dog, he is a part of me. He's in my soul group. And, he might have been a human in a past life. And that's the curious mind I have, that, he came into my life for a reason. And the story with him is unbelievable. It was meant to be. He was the last pup of the litter. His mum was called Pippa. And it came up. I remember sat refreshing the page looking for a puppy. And it came up. One puppy left. The original owners changed their mind. And I sometimes sit and think, imagine if them owners wouldn't have changed their mind, he would be with them. And I can't contemplate it. I'm like, he is mine.
Yeah, better not to go there. Go there.
He knows me. And it's just so strange. You don't, again, like this language as well. Like, we have this language, we've created all these different languages to speak. And you'll know, Sarah, when you're meditating and channeling, a lot of language just comes from a knowing. It's just a knowing.
Sure. It's pre-verbal.
Yeah. And, reading Conversations with God, I've just finished book 2. God says, you've created all these languages. I speak telepathically. And, sometimes I can look at Arlo, my dog, in the eyes, and I know exactly what's up with him. I know how he's feeling. I know when he's sulking. I know you just get to know them so well. And it's funny how you went straight into how you got on the spiritual journey, because I was thinking to ask you that. So you're obviously reading my mind there. And
it took a while for it to evolve, for sure.
Yeah.
It took into, my 20s and my 30s and, really doing some more study. But I think we have this at a very base level. And there was one study that was done, and it was in the US, but, I suspect it may be similar around the world, but it said that 89% of people consider themselves spiritual to some extent, and that spirituality is important to their lives. That's 89%.
That's a lot.
So, and there have been some fascinating studies during the pandemic about what you're talking about with human animal, specifically human canine pairs, where they did one study of mindfulness activities. And so they asked different groups of, dog human pairs to do different types of meditation or mindfulness together. And they also asked the humans to do meditation based on an attribute of the dog. So, meditate on the softness of their fur, meditate on your connection, meditate on their breathing. And they found out that there were significant benefits for humans. And the humans also reported, on behalf of the dogs, of course, that the dogs seemed happier. So when we're able to do these interspecies practices, when we're able to not say, oh, it's just a dog, it can't do mindfulness. I suspect that, hey, my cats can do mindfulness much better than I can. They sleep like 50% of the day. They meditate, they sleep, they chill out, they're relaxed, and they're very inspiring. But, recently, actually last year, we started a organization called the Compassion Consortium, which is this interspecies spiritual community. And we meet one Sunday a month. And we do these things. We do, movement practices with goats, and we do chanting with sheep, and all of these, using video. We don't get all the sheep, in there, but we do have one of our staff members who goes and does these things, and it's just fascinating the impact that it can have on us. So I'm not a fan of the just a dog, or just a cat, or just a squirrel, but I think it's a defense mechanism, Pippa. I think if we say that, we don't have to deal with the pain.
Yeah, it's like the connection. Loss. You're breaking that connection, isn't it? Like, because it's you're
like, denying the connection.
Well, you're rejecting yourself, not rejecting yourself, but saying denying you. You're denying that, he's a part of me, and I'm a part of him. We're all connected into this oneness, and that's what I really started when I had my quantum shift almost 2 years ago. I just completely, even Wayne Dyer speaks about, he did the Shift movie, and he recommends a book, Quantum Change. And I remember I read Quantum Change, and all these people like had these quantum moments and quantum shifts, and they would be in the shower, on the toilet, they'd be out in nature. I was out in nature, thank God. But and he says in the shift, you can't explain it. I can't physically put it into words a lot of the time. I just explained that one day I went out for a walk with him, and then I came back a different person. Something just went snap. And ever since then, I think 2 months after that, Chris came to the UK, and he had his quantum shift like 2 months after me. And we've just not been the same since. And then obviously the ascension's just gone. And like you said, for me, it's the openness, it's the awareness. Like I can't go back to being that full 3D.
No, once your eyes are open, it's very, very hard to shut them again. And I think that especially when we're looking at the connection between animals and some of the cruelty that's going on right now in, closed windowless buildings, in the name of science, or in the name of hamburgers, or, any of those kind of things. Once your eyes open to the connections, it's really hard, not to see it. And then you raise this other question of, if we're all one, like what products am I buying? And, what am I supporting? And where's my advocacy going? I think that quantum shift, we have a lot of different names for it in each one of the traditions. There's a favorite line I have from Zen that says, enlightenment is an accident, but practice makes you accident prone.
I like that.
So the more that we're meditating or praying or forest bathing or kirtan or whatever floats your boat, whatever, gets you connected, the more you create this kind of fertile soil for those aha moments.
Yeah.
That may surprise you on the toilet or out in nature or grocery shopping or, whatever it is.
I remember like having like a little awakening, like an aha moment. And then I remember Chris and I would say, so what's next? Like, how can I get more awake? You don't think that you can. And then something comes along and you think, wow, and I think for me in the last year, being away from Chris physically, it's not to say forced. I don't like the word forced, but it has forced me to be alone, look in the mirror, do the trigger work, do the trauma work. And it's, I would definitely say that I'm more peaceful, not to say that things don't irritate me, because I'm a human, things irritate me. And I did a hypnotherapy session today because I've just qualified as a hypnotherapist, quantum healing hypnosis technique therapist. And I did a session today, and her partner, before we did the session, I said something and I went back on it, and he said, no, you can say that. And what it was, I said, moving to New Zealand, it's like quieter, there's less people. I said, because people really irritate me. And then my mind said, you can't say that, that's a judgment. And then I said, oh, no, not irritate. He said, no, you can say that people irritate you because you're allowed to say that. It's not like I'm making a judgment about a person. It's just that a lot of people.
It's an observation.
Yeah. And it's not like, it's just because you get, I don't know, it's when you get more spiritual and you ascend, I just find it's the vibration barrier for me. It's again, like you said, when you start to ascend, the low vibration just doesn't resonate with you anymore, because again, it's a frequency. It's like a radio channel, you can't, it just doesn't mix. So, I do find, I'm trying to find that middle ground of, it's trying to be, what's the word that I found the other day when I was meditating? It's that compassionate, it's the being compassionate and open. And sometimes I find myself in this like dilemma in my head. Like I want to be like Dalai Lama and all these spiritual masters who are just, I used to think to myself, they must have had such a peaceful life. But then I thought there must have been things that annoyed them.
Yeah. So, there's a great Dalai Lama one. There's a video on YouTube you can look up. Google Dalai Lama and mosquito.
Okay.
And what an interview is asking him and says, all right, Dalai Lama, if we're supposed to be having compassion for all creatures, what do you do about a mosquito? And it's a great question. And, because you don't say, oh, what do you do about a furry cat? Right. Let's go to something that, irritates many humans and, can have some health concerns and all that. So the Dalai Lama says, well, the first time I'm going to kind of gently, blow to see if he'll leave. And if the mosquito doesn't leave, the next time I'm going to kind of like move my hand, and try to, kind of get him to leave. And the third time, well, something I'm paraphrasing, of course, in my own language, the Dalai Lama, but he's speaking to even our most revered and wise sages have these questions and have these conflicts and these ethical dilemmas of, what do you do and how do you engage in that? Mm-hmm. And, so I think that we can look to how, to their honesty, authenticity
as well. Yeah.
Authenticity of, this isn't about being perfect.
No.
I think if it's about being perfect, then we're in bypass. We're in spiritual bypass. I don't know if you've heard that term.
I have. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We're in this kind of everything's awesome. Everything's rosy. Everything's good. Everything's perfect. And that's just not the reality of the world.
That's kind of like it is a denial, isn't it? You're denying something that
it is. And if you look at any of the folks who started our spiritual traditions, okay, let's look at it. Let's look at Moses, Muhammad, Jesus, the Buddha, any of these folks, they started their path because something was really not right around them. Something was really not right. And they said, I need to, and most of the time, it's injustice of some sort. And people being hurt in some way. Yeah. And so they say, they have this aha moment or series of moments, or this connection with divinity, or connection with an inner self or true self, or, whatever language we want to use. It doesn't really matter, but they have this moment. So I think being spiritual requires us to engage with the world around us. We can't just leave it. But it allows us to self-regulate better, to not end up, that sobbing mess on the floor saying, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So it's about balance. It's so much about balance. Make your environment something that supports you and your practices that support you. And also, as our Buddhist friends again would tell us, I'm on a Buddhist streak today, I guess, but, no mud, no lotus. There's going to be some mess.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes that I read the other week was, authenticity is being at peace with all of our imperfections. Because
that's well said.
I read that after I'd read a chapter in Conversation with God, and he said, there's no right and wrong here. I'm just, I'm an observer through you. I'm here to experience through you. So, and me and Chris got onto a really deep topic in that book about where's the fine line with what's good and bad, who puts the line of what's good, what's bad. And that really hit me. I thought, there's so many of us that say that's wrong, that he shouldn't have done that. That's wrong. That's awful. He should be killed for that. There's so much judgment again, but then everyone's tolerance is different. So as God said in the chapters, where do I put the line? So is stealing okay? But then like arson isn't, and I just sat with it and I thought,
yeah. And the idea that there is a line is, I think, something to question too, where, we see everything, we look at gender, we look at sexuality, we look at our thoughts, everything is a spectrum.
The duality.
It's not this kind of either or kind of thing. And I think that when we can remove, now this is something I learned in 12-step spirituality. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and 12-step was a big part of my journey earlier. And, there's this idea of you don't use right and wrong. You use, healthy, unhealthy, skillful, unskillful. What kind of other pairs can we use? Because right and wrong just shuts it down. If something's unhealthy, then I can work to be healthier.
Yeah.
If something's unskillful that I said, then I can learn to communicate better. But you don't really learn how to become righter or wronger.
Yeah. Right? Everyone's is different.
Yeah. And it's not really useful. It's what we do. Our brain, processes 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. We have to sort. We have to make, our survival and our biological evolution, helps us make very quick snap judgments. Is this safe? Is this not safe? Do I fight, flee, freeze? Do I do any of these things? Yeah. But I think that spirituality and religious traditions and philosophical thinking, these provide us that ability to say, okay, I had this snap judgment. That dude is wrong. And then what do we say about, okay, what's going on in my body? The heart's probably, beating real fast. We might be sweating. The face is flushing. Take some breaths, sit down. Let's do a little inquiry into this and, see if we can come out. I do a lot of work with people on that around animals.
Yeah.
Of our belief about what animals are for. Mm-hmm. And one of the words that I hate, and I'm going to say the word hate, because the feeling is that strong, and it's okay for me to say that right now. I hate the word pest.
Yeah.
I really, the idea that something is a pest.
And someone makes money from pest control. Oh, that must annoy you.
Yeah. And it's true that we have, human wildlife conflicts. That's true. But just to categorize someone as a pest, just, creates this idea that it's okay for them to be killed. And, let's just face it. I'm the lady with the Tupperware grabbing the mice in my house before the cats can and putting them outside. And I realize that may sound extreme to some listeners. But, spirituality is how I got there. Of why is my life of more value than theirs? Now, there's things I can do to keep those mice out and make my house less habitable. I can clean up the holes. I can stuff the areas where they're getting in. That's my responsibility. To make sure that my home isn't inviting to people I don't want in it. So, how do I do that rather than just to say, oh, pest?
Just kill them.
Yeah. And that's tough work. That, it's really tough inquiry. But we have a lot of sacred texts that talk about that. And what do we do?
Yeah, there's two things there. There's one thing that me and Chris always mention is, instead of saying hate and don't like something, we say doesn't resonate, or it resonates, doesn't resonate, resonates. Because again, it's like an observation we made. And I know we touched on this last week when we had a chat about, where's the fine line with, killing something. That's you taking that, if that mouse has come to live how many years on this planet and then you kill it, you're kind of like interrupting its life path. So I know we got onto this topic, and Wayne spoke about this on one of his lectures. He said, who am I to kill that animal when, and it just got me thinking. I thought, you're actually interrupting, the circle and balance of life, really. And I know there's obviously the argument of, people who are very much meat eaters, and they say, well, if we didn't eat as much meat, all these cattle are just being bred for us to eat. And I get that, all of us need most of us need feeding with meat. So, all these, there's so much reproduction of it. But I always think to myself, well, hang on, if we all just said Meatless Monday, say all of us, every single person on the planet said Meatless Monday, that would just slash you don't realize how much like a small little thing can do such a huge impact.
It can. An article was just released this past week about Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers. Just them existing and people purchasing, from that has saved 1 million animal lives.
Wow.
So this idea that there's just cattle out there that need to be eaten is a little bit of an error in our thinking, because if we stop breeding them, using the things that we do to female cows, right, which is not pleasant, we just won't go there, then they won't be there. So, it's very fascinating, the idea of domesticating and having dominion over animals and believing that everything is put here for our use. It's dicey to kind of look at that. So as I'm really, really excited to see a lot of the plant-based stuff ramping up, so that we can stop cutting down the Amazon for grazing, so that we can stop polluting the waters with fishing nets that are discarded by commercial fishing. And, that's a whole nother episode and a whole nother conversation. But I do think that if we say that we're living with spiritual values, and if we say that we have this oneness, then we do have a responsibility to kind of look at that. And like you say, make some decisions. They just went in New York City in schools. They have vegan Fridays.
Amazing.
With little kids. Isn't that fascinating? So then they can just have a choice and a little bit of education about, how they might want to live. And, our kids are the ones who are inheriting this planet. So, if they have a lot of information about the intersections, I think that's fabulous. They're also getting a lot of mindfulness in school now too. So, that's really helpful. So like you said, it's messy. It's really, really messy.
So much. And like you said, you wipe one species out and it just affects the whole chain. Like that's just it. You can go on. There's so much to talk about on that topic because it just, and I remember I had my hypnosis past life regression 2 weeks ago. And one of my lives, I went back to tribal times, probably a couple of thousand years ago. Cause I didn't wear much. It was just, I just had something to cover my private parts.
Yeah.
And, the hypnotherapist was asking, what do you eat? I said, well, we go and kill, like lives, like a livestock or whatever it was. And I remember the ritual we did, I remember like the whole tribe would like come around and like say this prayer and thank this animal for feed. It was like really fascinating what I saw in this life. And I thought that's how we used to live, obviously, because we would kill one animal and then it would feed the whole tribe for like 2-3 weeks, say. But like now it's just, everything's just so need it now, want it tomorrow, quick. I want it now. But again, like touching on to that deeper level is that there's so many of us in the power, the hungry, the money, the ego. And then we don't allow our mind to open up to like, hang on, I have a choice in this. Does this resonate with me? Is this healthy? Is this unhealthy? And we're just in this society like driven tunnel vision. And when you start to open the blinkers and you look further afield, you then start to realize, that did taste good. That vegan burger was really nice. And, McDonald's now brought a vegan burger out. I think that's amazing because you can see I'm getting goosebumps as I talk about stuff like this, but you can see how a lot of companies, McDonald's make billions. So they've got to make changes because people are starting to eat more vegan, eat more vegetarian. I do try my best to eat more vegetarian. I've cut red meat out. I don't eat red meat anymore. And we're not here to say, stop meat, don't eat meat ever again. It's making small changes. And as you grow spiritually, you'll start to make different choices that again are healthy for you, that resonate with you, that align you. If I ate a steak now, I would be off balance for about 2 weeks. I just know it because I just wouldn't feel right. Everything's energy. And again, it doesn't align with me. So you start to really go within and you ask yourself, what does my body want? What does my body need? and you start listening to your body. And that's another topic for another episode as well. It's just, there's so many avenues.
It is. And when spirituality is embodied, and when we're thinking about it, not just being something kind of hanging out in the, I heard someone once said we spend most of our lives kind of with our center of focus outside and in front of our foreheads, thinking. And when we can get into our bodies and consider, what am I doing? What am I putting in my body? That's a hard one for me. I love cola. I love pop soda, whatever you call it, wherever you're listening from. I love sugar. And I also know that ramping down, like throwing in a lot of sugar and then sitting down to meditate is just a recipe for frustration. And yet I do it. So, looking at where are our growing edges, where are the things that we're belligerent about? I'm belligerent about my sugar. And I know I'm belligerent about it because I know that it's something that's out of alignment, but I'm just not quite ready yet.
I know.
So these kind of conversations, I think that, the reason that religions and spiritual traditions started was because we had people in groups around different values of things they thought were important, and they were interested in introspection and curious questions. To go back to the beginning of our podcast here, they were interested in a whole lot of things, and they gathered based on, how do we live together with all of these things going? So, I think that that's what living a spiritual life, regardless of which of these traditions that we're in, is about having great conversations with each other about where we're doing great, where we think we've got some room for improvement, and listening to each other for, different ideas that we're just kind of willing to consider. Not preaching at each other, but what does Pippa say that has opened something up for me? What have I said that has opened up something for Pippa, or you who are listening to the podcast? What did we say that felt shiny? What felt interesting? What felt like you might want to take it into your practice and think a little more about it? Or what really might have angered you or frustrated you? That's good, fertile area too for, I disagreed with something they said. And, what's that about? What's going on inside of you? And how do you deal with disappointment or frustration or, conflict that goes on? So I think that's what we've got to do. I don't think anybody has all the answers. But I think we all have a piece of it. We all have a piece of that oneness.
We do.
And we just got to keep our piece growing and becoming more compassionate and more willing to see.
Yeah. I was just thinking, as you were saying then, like these masters that we, that aren't here anymore in the physical form, they probably weren't perfect. They probably loved sugar and loved, they had their little guilty pleasures because, again, we came to be a human. And humans are, we're not perfect. We come from a perfect source, but then, we would have stayed there,
There's the paradox. The paradox is, we hear in many of the traditions, we're perfect and we're imperfect. And can we allow that to exist, that we can be both of? Can we get rid of some of the Greek philosophers that told us that there was either or? And can we switch into a state of both and? I am damn perfect, and I'm really imperfect too. Yeah.
That's like such a powerful message, because I know a lot of my clients I work with, they're just striving for perfection. And I say, you're never going to get it. Like you literally, like you said, it's like you've got that light in front of your head and you're constantly trying to grab it and you just keep going. It's like a piece of chocolate on a string and you can't get it.
And why do we want it? Why do we want to be perfect? So what is this value that we've placed on the idea of perfect? And we can look into Christianity a little bit, for its influence in not necessarily in what Jesus said, but in what evolved from some of his sayings and some of his ideas into an idea of, perfect. But we'll find it in other places too, not just to throw it down there. We're going to find striving. In the Bhagavad Gita tells us, don't get attached to the fruits, like don't get attached to this stuff, but we're going to find striving and we're going to continue to do that. And that's part of the improvement. There's your other paradox. We're always trying to improve and yet we're perfect the way we are.
Yeah. It's just,
right. That's another mess to open up in philosophy.
I know that the best one is, Wayne, have a mind open to everything and attached to nothing. Because we have this attachment to things, don't we? Like, you know, I've got an attachment to chocolate. I love chocolate. I have an attachment to speaking because I love speaking, but it's like, it's removing the attachment. And I always say, again, when people say like, you know, I'm suffering, you know, I know a lot of the masters say there is no such thing as suffering. You know, before you came to earth, you chose challenges to help you grow. But these are just words that we say, you know, a challenge, you know, where's that come from? Where's the word challenge come from? So we associate challenge with something really hard. We you know, relate to suffering as something like grief. So again, it's releasing all that attachment to it all. And it's just a word. Because again, like, think about that study with the 2 plants. You know, you said all these crap words to one plant and then all the loving words to the other plant. They both...
I know, I feel so bad for that plant that gets the crap words.
I know.
I feel bad in any kind of study that. So there was this fascinating study working with bush babies, you know, little critters who'd been
so cute.
And so they had some people who did intercessory prayer. So intercessory prayer is just a word for when you pray for another person. And so they had these people who were really skilled in that, pray every day for 4 weeks for the bush babies, that they would heal, that their wounds would get smaller, that they would stop self-hurting themselves. They were in captivity. So they, you know, they were doing the things that animals who are captive do. And they did this study and they found out that the bush babies who had been prayed for, their wounds were smaller. They had stopped injuring themselves and they were in better health than the ones who did, or who did not receive prayer. So I'm like, fascinating study, completely explains why we do loving kindness, metta prayer in traditions. And at the same time, I'm really upset about the bush babies who didn't get the prayer, so that we could prove, right, that it. So I kind of hope that at the end of that,
but I wonder if that was, you know,
then they went and prayed for those.
Yeah. Like, I wonder if them bush babies knew, like, oh, well, my purpose in this lifetime was to not have the prayers. Like, I always think about that. Well, that was their mission.
Yeah. It's possible. I don't know. So, you know, I'm fascinated by studies. And then I'm also like, okay, go fix the people that you didn't, you know, the beginning, so that we can kind of even it out, not to withhold compassion. You know, I do believe that, you know, I love the idea of Dharma and I love the ideas of purpose and I love all of that. And I also want to make sure that we're spreading compassion as far as we each can, that we're not denying that because we think someone's job is to suffer. And we can see that dark side kind of happen sometimes, where we can say this person's job is to suffer. That's not what you were saying, but I've heard that in different conversations. And I'm like, well, if it is, compassion towards them can't hurt. And
it's compassion for yourself. I remember a story Wayne always tells when he speaks, when he spoke on stage. And he said, you know, if you squeeze an orange, what would come out? Not pineapple juice, not apple juice, orange juice. So if someone squeezed you, what would come out of you? So I thought about that and I thought, okay, if someone came up to me now and said, right, Pip, I'm going to squeeze you, what would come out? And if you ask yourself that every day, you know, I want love and compassion and happiness and joy to come out of me. So that's not to say some days a bit of, you know, you'll be angry or disappointment will come out, because
a little bit of orange comes out,
you know, but it's to think about, you know, it's just great to relate to something like that, because, you know, what is coming out, your soul essence is pure love.
Yeah,
you know, it's a
very useful, illustration. I think Dyer was very, very good at taking concepts that we find, age-old concepts, and really putting them in language that we can understand. And I think that's why we have such a proliferation of books and of videos and movies and all that. You know, since the 1960s or so, is, you know, we found a lot of really talented teachers who, you know, once the Eastern traditions came over in the late 1800s for the Parliamental world traditions, right? When that happened, and all of these ideas started kind of mixing and mingling, and we got people who were able to articulate them in ways that modern ears can really hear them. So it can be a really great entry point into these concepts that you're talking about on your podcast and that I'm teaching at the seminary. Yeah.
I love it. So before we finish, is there anything else that you want to tell the listeners? I want to just touch before we do finish about some of the practices that you do, to help you connect.
Oh, I have so many. That's the occupational hazard of teaching in an interfaith, interspiritual seminary. So I am not someone who can sit every morning on the same meditation cushion and be very disciplined. I have friends who do that. It's amazing. But for me, it really depends on what challenges I'm facing during the day. And I use that word challenges. What different things are coming up for me in the day? Most mornings, I'll do a little meditation with squirrels as I drink my tea and look out the window and connect with the natural world to start my day, not pick up my phone and immediately go towards that. Then I'll do a practice called I Ching that comes from Taoism, which is a divination practice that folks who love tarot should try. And that helps me kind of dig into what the day holds for me. Based on what the coins come up, then you do a reading out of the book, and it asks you some different questions. During the day, there'll be periods of meditation. I do, I had not prayed for years and years and years, but I brought that back recently, probably the last 5 or 10 years. So I do some loving kindness prayers for people. And I also do, a lot of different things with groups. So I'll do, kirtan chanting is a beautiful kind of thing. Or, I may do some yoga during the day. It's a mixed bag, Pippa. So,
Exactly.
I think that being able to have this really great toolbox, to use an overused word, but this toolbox of all these different spiritual practices that I can draw from during the day. If I'm really hyper, if I've had too much sugar, I may need some meditation. I may need a sacred nap. I love sacred napping.
It looks different to everyone, doesn't it? It's just...
Yeah, it really does. So I think that what I encourage people and my students to do is to, whatever is working for you, and get to, like you said earlier, Pippa, get to know your body.
Yeah.
Also get to know your spirit, get to know your mind, your mental state. And the more of these things you can try, even if they sound weird or scary or they're not for me at the beginning, the more tools you'll have.
Yeah. And I always say to clients, there's this real emphasis on mindset, drill it into you, do it for 21 days and it'll become a habit. And I kind of get that. But then it's like, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to have this 21 days of every day I've got to do this and at this certain time. And I just say, no, consistency is really good. Like I've got one client this weekend, she's just overwhelmed with like doing trauma work and trigger work. And I said, you know what? Take a break. Don't do any of it. Just have Friday night, Saturday night with your husband and your children. And she's like, okay, deal. And that's feeling into
the
what
intent. It's the intent of practice. Yeah. It's the intent of what we're trying to get. It isn't about doing the specific thing.
It's about
that's getting attached to the fruits again.
Change
it's
doing.
About, it's about the state that you're getting. Now, at the seminary that I teach, we do that. It's amazing at One Spirit, where our students, all of September, will do Hindu practices. October, they do Buddhist. We go through, and then they do Judaism, then Christianity, then Islam, then indigenous practices, right? And done in a way that we're very respectful around culture as well and what we're doing. But, they will practice something for a month and then see if something, sticks with them. But then after that amount of days, there's the ability to jettison it if it's not, or keep it if it is. So I think that I would say that I would quote Yoda, because I haven't yet on our podcast, do or do not, there is no try, just do practices, do them and see if they work for you. And then, if your trying is stressing you, then try something else.
Yeah, exactly. I say just flow. And if you don't feel like you're flowing, you feel like you're forcing something, take a step back. Yeah. But this, like I said, anyone listening, this is your path. This, I said, we can all hold hands as we walk down this path, but sometimes we'll have to let go because I'll get further along, you'll get further along. But it's having the compassion for where you are. I always have this vision of me looking back on the path, say someone's next to me, like on a path, in spirit. And I just say, I'll wait and let them catch up. And I'm very good at that. That's the compassion in me. But again, the comparison doesn't mean I'm ahead of you, doesn't mean I'm better than you, doesn't mean you're below me.
You're on a different road up the same mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but then people who are on the journey is just having compassion for where people are on the journey. And like us educators, like I actually had a psychic reading the other day and she said, I'm a spiritual educator. And I thought that was weird because so are you. I love sharing wisdom. If I learn something, I love to share it,
And that's how we learn from each other, and I think there's value also if something starts to get hard. To try sticking with it too. So again, I've spoken to another paradox here. Discipline is great, and so is fluidity.
Yeah.
So if we can take both of those ideas and really look at ourselves with gentleness, but also, not too much complacency sometimes too, if we might be missing an opportunity. So I think it's all of these things, Pip. I think my answer to this last question is messy and spirally and conflicting in the things that I've said. And that is really my experience of spirituality.
I just could talk to you for hours, Sarah. I really could. Maybe we'll do
we'll do this again. We'll do this again in the future.
I'll bring you up for a part 2. And yeah, I know the listeners are going to really love listening to this. And I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes, your book. I'm going to put your website on there and obviously where to find you on the socials. But you inspire me so much.
Well, thank you, Pippa. And you inspire me as well. And thank you for continuing to spread all this information to your listeners. It's so important. And it's so just beautiful to connect with you. You have such a great energy and vibration and compassion. And it's really been an honor to talk with you.
Thank you. That warms my heart a lot. Thank you. I'm going to just sit with that for a second and just receive it. That's what I'm trying to do, is just allow things to come in and just receive them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And I really hope everyone's enjoyed it. So any questions, like I said, if anything resonated or didn't resonate, just reach out to us because we love that. We just love having everything because, again, everyone's so different. So, don't be afraid to reach out. And if you want more clarity or you want us to talk about a different topic, just reach out and we'll be happy to respond. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody.